In the summer of 1940, the entire world was holding its breath. You see, the fate of nations wasn't being decided on some battlefield on the ground. No, it was being decided thousands of feet in the air, right above the English Channel. And this was so much more than just a dogfight. It was a clash of ideas, a brutal test of brand new technology, and really, a contest of sheer will that would absolutely define the course of the Second World War. So, to really get what happened up in those skies, we're going to look at how Britain found itself standing completely alone. We'll dive into how these new theories of air power were put to the test in the heat of combat, and we'll uncover the secret weapon that gave the RAF its critical edge. We'll also examine why bombing cities, as it turns out, failed to break a nation's spirit. And finally, we'll pull out the powerful lessons learned from those incredibly desperate months. Let's be clear, the situation was desperate. I mean, truly desperate. France had just fallen, which meant Britain was suddenly the last line of defense in Europe. The full, terrifying power of the Nazi war machine was coiled just across a narrow strip of water, and it was pointed right at them. Now, to get past the myths and the movies and really dig into the strategy here, we're basing this whole explainer on a scholarly analysis from the Journal of Strategic Studies. It's going to help us unpack the competing ideas and technologies that ultimately decided who won. Okay, so everything, and I mean everything, hinged on this one simple fact. Hitler's plan to invade Britain, which was codenamed Operation Sea Lion, was totally impossible without one thing happening first. The Luftwaffe, Germany's air force, had to completely wipe out the Royal Air Force, because without total control of the skies, any invasion fleet trying to cross the channel would have just been sent straight to the bottom. And this chart, wow, it really shows you the daunting reality the RAF was facing. The Luftwaffe went into this battle with a massive advantage in numbers. We're talking roughly 2,500 aircraft against Britain's much, much smaller force. Just looking at the numbers, you'd think the odds were completely, overwhelmingly stacked against them. But here's the thing. This battle wasn't just going to be a numbers game. Not at all. It was a head-on collision between two totally different philosophies of how to use air power, and each one was being put to the ultimate test for the very first time. And right here, you can see the two competing game plans clear as day. Germany was all in on offense. Their whole strategy was based on this idea of a swift, decisive knockout blow from the air that would just shatter an enemy's ability and will to fight. Britain, on the other hand, well, they bet everything on defense. This incredibly sophisticated, integrated shield designed to absorb that punch and just make the price of attacking way too high to pay. You know, this German confidence didn't just come out of nowhere. It was rooted in this really powerful idea from before the war, championed by theorists like Julio de Waite, who basically said, the bomber will always get through. It was the conventional wisdom. Almost everyone believed that nothing could possibly stop a massive bombing raid. Well, the RAF was about to challenge that theory head-on. So, the big question is, if they were so outnumbered, how on earth did the RAF possibly hold on? Now, the iconic Spitfire and Hurricane fighters were absolutely critical, don't get me wrong, but they weren't the whole story. Britain's real ace in the hole was something the Germans couldn't see, and, maybe more importantly, something they just didn't understand. And this was the game changer, the Dowding System. It was named after Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding, and it was the world's first truly integrated air defense network. It was revolutionary. It linked early warning radar, observers on the ground, and fighter command centers into one single deadly weapon. And you can see just how brilliant the system was right here. The radar stations gave them the early warning. All that information was then fed into command centers, where they could figure out the size and direction of the attack. And then, and this is the absolute key, they scrambled just the right number of fighters to meet the enemy at exactly the right place. That incredible efficiency saved precious pilots, fuel, and planes. But what's really astonishing is that the Germans just didn't get it. They knew Britain had radar, sure, but they completely underestimated how central it was to the entire defensive system. They never systematically targeted the radar chain or the command centers. And by failing to do that, they left the RAF's biggest advantage almost completely untouched. So the Germans are getting frustrated. They can't seem to beat the RAF in the air. So what do? They switch tactics. They start targeting British cities directly, hoping they could terrorize the civilian population into giving up. This new phase, which we all know as the Blitz, would become a brutal, real-world test of that other pre-war theory, that you could break a nation's will to fight from the sky. And the human cost, it was just immense. Starting in September 1940, these relentless bombing raids on London and other cities killed over 40,000 civilians. The German objective couldn't have been clearer: create so much panic and despair that the British people would demand their government surrender. This brings us to one of the most vital questions to come out of the entire battle. For all that devastation, for all that loss of life, did this campaign of terror bombing actually achieve what it was supposed to? Did it work? Did it succeed in breaking British morale? Well, the evidence points to a resounding no. All those pre-war predictions of society just collapsing into mass panic, they were just plain wrong. Instead of panicking, the shared suffering often had the opposite effect. It hardened public resolve. Plus, the bombing was too inaccurate to be a really effective weapon of coercion. So, was British morale tested? Absolutely. Was it bent? For sure. But it never, ever broke. Okay, so Britain survives. But what was the lasting impact of this incredible victory? Well, it turns out this desperate fight, won against all odds, would fundamentally reshape how militaries thought about war for the rest of the 20th century and even today. And this, right here, gets to the absolute heart of the victory. See, the RAF didn't need to destroy the Luftwaffe completely. They just had to stop the Luftwaffe from winning. By inflicting such heavy losses, they made the price of invasion just too high to pay. It's a classic example of what strategists call deterrence by denial. You win by making it impossible for your enemy to achieve their goal. So when you boil it all down, the legacy is just profound. The battle basically cemented the #1 rule of modern warfare: you can't win without controlling the air. It proved the incredible power of integrated technology like radar. It taught a really hard lesson about just how resilient civilians can be. And its model of deterrence, of making aggression too costly, would echo for decades, especially in Cold War strategy. Which all leaves us with a really fascinating question for today. In our world of cyber warfare, drones, and satellites, how relevant are these lessons from 1940? Is a smart, integrated defense, combined with the unbreakable will of a population, still the ultimate deterrent? Well, the echoes from those skies over Britain all those years ago seem to suggest the answer is a definitive yes.